There are some conditions that we all think we know. They're household names, but what we think we know is often just a caricature, something we've picked up from movies and TV. Tourette's syndrome is a perfect example of this. So let's dive in, because the real story is so much more complex and, frankly, more fascinating than any stereotype.
Okay, right off the bat, let's just bust the biggest myth there is. When I say Tourette's, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most people, it's involuntary swearing. But in reality, that symptom, which has a name, coprolalia, only affects about 10 to 15% of people with the condition. Yeah, that's it. For the vast majority, it's not even part of their experience. So that just blows the whole Hollywood version out of the water, right? It immediately begs the question, if it's not what we see in the movies, then what is the real story behind Tourette syndrome? Well, that is exactly what we are going to unpack right now. Our first step is to move past that stereotype and just get a clear, factual baseline. Let's find out what this condition actually is. Okay, so here's the most crucial thing to understand. Tourette syndrome is a neurodevelopmental disorder. That means it starts in the brain. It's not a psychological problem or some kind of behavioral issue. To get a diagnosis, a person has to have multiple motor tics, those are physical movements, and at least one vocal tic, which is a sound. And these have to start in childhood and stick around for more than a year. And get this, while it might seem like a really rare thing, it's actually way more common than most people think. It affects about 1 in every 162 kids around the world. I mean, think about that for a second. In any big elementary school, there are probably a few students who are living with Tourette's every day. But knowing the facts is one thing. What does it actually feel like to have Tourette's? To really get it, we have to look past what we can see on the outside and try to understand the internal experience of a tic. You see, for about 90% of people with Tourette's, a tic doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. Before it happens, there's something called a premonitory urge. Imagine a building tension before a sneeze or an itch that you absolutely have to scratch. It's an uncomfortable feeling that builds and builds until it's released by the tic. In fact, a lot of people say that urge is actually way more bothersome than the tic itself. And those tics, the things that release the urge, they come in all shapes and sizes. You've got simple tics, which are really brief, sudden movements or sounds. Think an eye blank, a sniff, or a grunt. And then you have complex tics, which are more coordinated and can almost look like they're on purpose, like jumping, touching an object, or even repeating a word or phrase. Now, this brings us to a really critical point. People often think, well, if you can hold it in for a minute, why can't you just stop? But it's not that simple. Tics are best described as semi-voluntary. You can suppress them, sure, but it takes a massive amount of mental energy. It's like trying to hold your breath. You can do it for a while, but eventually you have to let it out. And when you do, the tics often come roaring back, even stronger than before. Okay, let's move on. Because what you see on the surface, the tics, is truly just the tip of the iceberg. For so many people, the biggest challenges are the ones you can't see at all. And this is where the picture gets so much deeper. Check out this number. A staggering 83% of kids with Tourette's also have at least one other co-occurring condition. Only a small fraction, just 17%, deal with tics and nothing else. This tells you right away that the tics might be the most obvious symptom, but they are rarely the whole story. So what else is going on? Well, the most common conditions that travel with Tourette's are ADHD, which can affect up to 2/3 of people, followed very closely by anxiety disorders and OCD. And for many, these conditions can actually cause more problems in day-to-day life, at school, at work, in relationships, than the tics themselves. So if it's this complex, how in the world is it managed? Well, this is the hopeful part. Our understanding of the science and the treatments that are available have absolutely exploded in recent years. So what's happening inside the brain? Well, at its core, Tourette's is kind of like a neurological traffic jam. It seems to be caused by misfires in a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. You can think of it as the brain's gatekeeper for movement. In Tourette's, that gate is a little, overeager, partly because it's being supercharged by the chemical dopamine. This lets unwanted movements and sounds, the tics, slip through when they shouldn't. And because we understand that, we have amazing therapies. Today, the #1 treatment isn't medication. It's a type of behavioral therapy called CBIT. It's a really practical 3-step process. First, you train yourself to recognize that premonitory urge we talked about. Second, you learn to do a competing response, basically a different, less noticeable action that makes the tic physically impossible to do. And third,
You learn to spot and change things in your environment that might trigger tics. It's all about empowering the individual and giving them a sense of control. But, clinical treatment is only one piece of the puzzle. Something just as important is happening out in the world. The public conversation is finally changing, and it's being led by people who are brave enough to share their own stories. Take a global superstar like Billie Eilish. When she talks about her tics, she shines a light on a hidden part of the experience. She says that even when her tics aren't obvious to an audience, the constant internal effort of managing those urges is physically exhausting. It just completely humanizes that invisible struggle. And then you have these incredible stories of high achieving, like the legendary goalkeeper Tim Howard. He actually found that when he was in the zone, his intense focus on the game could completely override the tics. It's such a powerful reminder that Tourette's absolutely does not have to be a barrier to performing at the highest level imaginable. So what does all this mean for us? How can we help? It really comes down to a few simple but incredibly powerful actions. The best thing you can possibly do is just ignore the tics. Don't stare, don't ask about them, just let them pass. If someone's speech gets interrupted by a tic, just be patient. And above all else, always, always focus on the person, not the condition. In the end, here's where we are. The science is getting better and clearer every single year. The treatments are more effective than ever. The biggest hurdle that's left isn't in a lab or a doctor's office. It's in our schools, our workplaces, our communities. The biggest challenge is us. So the real question is, are we ready to look past the tics and really see the person standing in front of us?